These people shouldn't be allowed in places meant for real customers. The waiter deliberately pours ice water over a black father's expensive suit, smirking. The upscale restaurant falls silent as the Daniels family sits humiliated at their table. What should have been a joyous graduation celebration has turned into a public degradation. Their waiter Blake stands with the empty pitcher, contempt visible beneath his thin veneer of false concern. "Oops," Blake announces theatrically, ensuring nearby diners hear every word. Some folks just don't understand proper etiquette in establishments like this. The father, Anthony Daniels, rises slowly. His expression remains unnervingly composed as water drips from his ruined suit. He reaches into his pocket and extracts a card. "Actually, I'm Anthony Daniels, CEO of Pinnacle Restaurant Group. I own this place, and 37 others nationwide." The waiter's face drains of color. "You're fired, effective immediately." But this moment of justice was only the beginning of something much bigger. The Daniels family approaches Costello's, an upscale Italian restaurant gleaming with polished glass and ambient lighting. Anthony adjusts his tailored suit as his wife Vanessa smooths her elegant dress. Their teenage daughter Jasmine practically floats in her graduation outfit, while 10-year-old Tyler fidgets with his tie. "Best Italian in Chicago," Anthony says, not revealing his recent acquisition of the restaurant. He wants to experience Costello's authentically, see how customers are really treated. The hostess greets them with professional warmth. "Welcome to Costello's. Do you have a reservation?" "Daniels, table for 4, Anthony responds. "We're celebrating my daughter's graduation." "Congratulations!" The hostess beams at Jasmine. "Right this way." As they follow her through the dining room, waiter Blake Henderson notices their approach. His smile falters, eyes narrowing slightly. He exchanges a quick glance with manager Thomas Fleming, who responds with an almost imperceptible nod. Blake approaches their table with visible reluctance. "Welcome." His greeting lacks the warmth offered to nearby tables. He stands stiffly, forgetting to provide menus until Anthony politely requests them. "Today's specials are..." Blake rushes through descriptions, deliberately speaking in a condescending, oversimplified manner. "The fish is fresh." He emphasizes the word as if explaining to children. At the next table, Blake transforms. He's attentive, knowledgeable, offering wine pairings and detailed descriptions to the white couple seated there. The contrast is striking. "We'd like to start with the calamari and the bruschetta," Anthony says, maintaining his composure while noting Blake's behavior. "And could I see your wine list?" Vanessa adds politely. Blake returns with a wine list, sliding it toward Anthony. "The prices are listed on the right," he says pointedly. Anthony selects an expensive bottle. "We'll have the Barolo, 2015. Blake raises his eyebrows. "Are you sure about that price point? Perhaps I could suggest something more appropriate?" Anthony meets his gaze steadily. "The Barolo will be fine, thank you." "It's your money. Mr. Daniels." Blake deliberately mispronounces the name, despite Anthony's earlier clear introduction. As Blake walks away, he whispers something to another server while glancing back at the Daniels family. Both snicker before separating. Tyler looks up at his father. "Dad, why is that man being weird?" Anthony places a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Some people have trouble seeing past their own prejudices, son." What the server doesn't realize is that every slight is being mentally cataloged by someone who has the power to do something about it. The Daniels family approaches Costello's, an upscale Italian restaurant gleaming with polished glass and ambient lighting. Anthony adjusts his tailored suit as his wife Michelle smooths her elegant dress. Their teenage daughter Jasmine practically floats in her graduation outfit, while 10-year-old Tyler fidgets with his tie. "Best Italian in Chicago," Anthony says, not revealing his recent acquisition of the restaurant. He wants to experience Costello's authentically, see how customers are really treated. The hostess greets them with professional warmth. "Welcome to Costello's. Do you have a reservation?" Daniels, table for 4, Anthony responds. We're celebrating my daughter's graduation. Congratulations, the hostess beams at Jasmine. Right this way. As they follow her through the dining room, waiter Blake Henderson notices their approach. His smile falters, eyes narrowing slightly. He exchanges a quick glance with manager Thomas Fleming, who responds with an almost imperceptible nod. Blake approaches their table with visible reluctance. Welcome. His greeting lacks the warmth offered to nearby tables. He stands stiffly, forgetting to provide menus until Anthony politely requests them. Today's specials are... Blake rushes through descriptions, deliberately speaking in a condescending, oversimplified manner. The fish is... fresh. He emphasizes the word as if explaining to children. At the next table, Blake transforms. He's attentive, knowledgeable, offering wine pairings and detailed descriptions to the white couple seated there. The contrast is striking. We'd like to start with the calamari and the bruschetta, Anthony says, maintaining his composure while noting Blake's behavior. And could I see your wine list? Michelle adds politely. Blake returns with a wine list, sliding it toward Anthony. The prices are listed on the right, he says pointedly. Anthony selects an expensive bottle. We'll have the Barolo 2015. Blake raises his eyebrows. Are you sure about that price point? Perhaps I could suggest something more appropriate? Anthony meets his gaze steadily. The Barolo will be fine, thank you. It's your money, Mr. Daniels. Blake deliberately mispronounces the name despite Anthony's earlier clear introduction. As Blake walks away, he whispers something to another server while glancing back at the Daniels family. Both snicker before separating. Tyler looks up at his father. Dad, why is that man being weird? Anthony places a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. Some people have trouble seeing past their own prejudices, son. What the server doesn't realize is that every slight is being mentally cataloged by someone who has the power to do something about it. Blake approaches with a tray of appetizers, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the Daniels family. He sets down plates of stuffed mushrooms and fried zucchini, neither of which they ordered. Enjoy your appetizers, he says curtly, already turning to leave. Excuse me, Anthony calls, his voice level. We ordered the calamari and bruschetta. Blake turns back, eyebrows raised in exaggerated surprise. No, you ordered these items. He speaks louder, as if volume will make his lie more convincing. Perhaps you misunderstood the menu descriptions? Several diners at nearby tables glance over. Jasmine sinks lower in her seat, her graduation celebration tainted by unwanted attention. Anthony remains perfectly composed, though Michelle notices the slight tightening of his jaw. I understand the menu perfectly, Anthony responds, opening it and pointing. Calamari fritti and bruschetta classica. These are neither. Blake's eyes narrow. I'll check with the kitchen, he says, tone suggesting the mistake couldn't possibly be his. As he collects the incorrect dishes, his movements are deliberately abrupt, jostling the table and nearly spilling their water glasses. Across the restaurant, manager Thomas observes the interaction. He makes no move to intervene, instead leaning against the bar with arms folded, watching the scene unfold with apparent amusement. Maybe we should go somewhere else, Michelle suggests quietly. This isn't how we should be celebrating Jasmine's achievement. Anthony subtly shakes his head. Under the table, he discreetly types a message on his phone. Why is he being so mean? Tyler whispers, confusion evident in his young voice. Anthony places his napkin in his lap, eyes never leaving Blake's retreating form. Sometimes, Tyler, people judge others without knowing anything about them. But it's important that we maintain our dignity and show that their behavior doesn't diminish our worth. Blake returns minutes later with the correct appetizers. As he leans over to place the bruschetta, he deliberately drops breadcrumbs onto Anthony's shoulder. Oh, so sorry, Blake says with theatrical insincerity. His apology is performed loudly for the benefit of onlookers, but his smirk betrays his true intent. Anthony brushes the crumbs from his suit jacket, maintaining unwavering eye contact with Blake, who shifts uncomfortably before retreating. Anthony's phone vibrates silently. A text message appears. Security footage access granted. Recording everything now. He slips the phone back into his pocket, his expression revealing nothing of the methodical documentation now underway. Blake's performance has just earned him a starring role in a drama he never anticipated. The Daniels entrees arrive 40 minutes later, long after surrounding tables who were seated after them have been served. Blake doesn't apologize for the delay. Instead, he hovers uncomfortably close to Michelle as he sets down her plate, the intrusion of personal space deliberate and discomforting. "Is there anything else you people need?" Blake emphasizes the phrase with subtle disdain. When Anthony requests more bread, Blake sighs dramatically. "I'll see what I can do." The bread never arrives. Throughout the restaurant, several staff members observe the situation with varying reactions. A few servers exchange uncomfortable glances but remain silent. One young server, a black woman with a name tag reading Tiana, watches with evident distress, though she keeps her distance, eyes darting nervously toward manager Thomas. Tyler drops his fork accidentally, the clatter drawing attention from nearby tables. Before Anthony can retrieve it, Blake materializes, making a theatrical production of cleaning up. "Let me get that for you," he announces loudly. "In establishments like Castello's, we typically hold our utensils like this." He mimes proper etiquette with exaggerated movements, looking pointedly at Anthony and Michelle. Perhaps the parents could demonstrate proper dining etiquette for their children? Jasmine stares at her plate, her graduation celebration thoroughly ruined. The achievement she'd worked so hard for now overshadowed by this public humiliation. Michelle reaches for her daughter's hand under the table, squeezing it reassuringly. "Our children have excellent manners," Anthony states calmly. "Accidents happen to everyone." Blake retreats momentarily only to return with a replacement fork, dropping it carelessly on the table rather than placing it properly. Throughout the meal, he checks on surrounding tables frequently, deliberately bypassing the Daniels family. Anthony maintains his composure, though Michelle notices his increasing tension in the slight furrow of his brow. He's documenting every interaction, she realizes, recognizing the expression he wears during critical business assessments. The final incident occurs as they finish their main course. Blake approaches with a large pitcher of ice water, ostensibly to refill their glasses. As he reaches Anthony's side, he trips on nothing. The entire pitcher cascades over Anthony, drenching his suit and splashing onto Michelle. Ice cubes scatter across the table and floor. The restaurant falls silent. "These people shouldn't be allowed in places meant for real customers," Blake says, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Then, with mock concern, "Oops, so sorry. Some folks just don't understand proper etiquette in establishments like this." The silence intensifies. Jasmine looks mortified. Tyler's eyes widen in shock. Michelle begins dabbing at her dress with a napkin, her hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger. Anthony rises slowly from his seat. Water drips from his ruined suit jacket, but his dignity remains intact. His expression is unnervingly calm as he reaches into his breast pocket, extracting a business card that somehow remained dry. "Actually," he says, voice steady and authoritative, "I'm Anthony Daniels, CEO of Pinnacle Restaurant Group. I own this place, and 37 others across the country." He holds the card between two fingers where Blake can clearly see his title. "You're fired, effective immediately." Blake's face drains of color. The pitcher hangs limply from his suddenly nerveless fingers. As stunned silence engulfs the restaurant, manager Thomas emerges from the shadows, his confident swagger replaced by visible panic. "Mr. Daniels, there must be some misunderstanding." Thomas approaches, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's cool temperature. His voice carries a forced joviality that doesn't reach his eyes. Anthony turns his steady gaze to the manager. "Is there? I've been watching you watch this unfold all evening. You did nothing." Thomas stammers. "Blake is one of our most experienced servers. I'm sure he didn't mean—" Michelle, Anthony interrupts calmly. Would you take the children to get cleaned up, please? His tone is gentle with his family, but leaves no room for discussion. Michelle nods, understanding the shift in her husband's demeanor. Come on, kids. She guides Jasmine and Tyler toward the restrooms, giving Anthony's arm a supportive squeeze as they pass. Once his family is out of earshot, Anthony's expression transforms, not to anger, but to something more focused, more determined. He pulls out his phone and dials. Diana, he says to his executive assistant, implement protocol dignity at Costello's Chicago, effective immediately. A pause. Yes, full documentation. I'm sending access codes for the security system now. Thomas hovers awkwardly, his confident demeanor completely evaporated. Behind him, the restaurant has become a hive of nervous energy. Servers whisper to each other. Customers pretend not to stare while watching intently. In the kitchen, panic spreads. Blake defends himself to fellow staff members, voice rising. How was I supposed to know? They didn't look like they could afford this place. You saw the suit he was wearing, a line cook counters. That's a $3,000 Armani. Whatever, Blake scoffs. Not my fault he can't take a joke. Tiana, the young server who had watched uncomfortably earlier, slips into the manager's office. She downloads security footage onto a flash drive, hands shaking but determined. In the women's restroom, Michelle helps Jasmine dry her splashed dress. I'm sorry your celebration was ruined, sweetheart. It's not your fault, Jasmine says quietly. Dad handled it really well. Is the bad waiter going to get in more trouble? Tyler asks, watching his mother dab at water spots on her dress. Michelle considers her answer carefully. When people behave unjustly, there should be consequences. But what's most important is how we respond. She kneels to eye level with her son. Your father showed strength by maintaining his dignity. That's a powerful lesson. Back in the dining room, Anthony makes another call. Sarah, legal department. I need immediate review of all complaints filed against Costello's Chicago in the past 12 months. He listens. Yes, particularly discrimination claims. And I want HR to pull all personnel records for Blake Henderson and Thomas Fleming. Thomas approaches again, hands spread placatingly. Mr. Daniels, please. We can comp your entire meal. This doesn't represent our values at Costello's. Anthony's gaze is penetrating. How many other families has he done this to while you watched? Thomas has no answer, his mouth opening and closing silently. Anthony's phone buzzes with an incoming text. He reads it, his expression unchanging despite the message. Found 3 previous discrimination complaints against both Blake and Thomas, all buried. He looks back at Thomas, who shifts uncomfortably under the scrutiny. I suggest you start updating your resume, Mr. Fleming. Outside the restaurant, a social media storm is already brewing as dinner patrons upload video of the confrontation. The Daniels family exits Costello's with dignity intact, despite their dampened clothing. Several patrons approach them in the parking lot, expressions sympathetic. Mr. Daniels? A woman steps forward, holding up her phone. I recorded what happened in there. It's already getting traction online. She turns the screen toward them, showing a social media post with rapidly climbing engagement numbers. Thank you, Anthony responds. But right now, my priority is my family. Once home, Anthony settles in his home office, suit changed but resolve undiminished. His laptop displays multiple windows, security footage from Costello's, employee records, complaint histories. Michelle brings him coffee, setting it beside stacks of documentation forwarded by his team. They found a pattern, Anthony says, voice tight. Not just Blake. The entire management structure has been enabling discrimination. The footage reveals damning evidence. Blake's behavior toward the Daniels family isn't an isolated incident. Thomas appears in several clips, observing similar treatment of other minority customers without intervention. 3 formal complaints in the past year alone, Anthony notes, scrolling through HR documentation, all dismissed as misunderstandings or customer overreactions. Michelle studies the files over his shoulder. Former employees? 5 terminated after reporting discriminatory practices. Anthony highlights sections of exit interviews. All pressured to sign NDAs. His phone rings. The regional director, Cameron Walsh. Anthony? Terrible misunderstanding tonight. Cameron begins without preamble, voice professionally concerned yet somehow dismissive. Blake Henderson has been with us for years, exemplary service record. I'm sure we can resolve this without drastic measures. Anthony listens silently, allowing the nervous monologue to continue. One bad employee shouldn't reflect on the entire establishment, Cameron continues. We could transfer him to another location. This isn't about one waiter, Anthony interrupts calmly. This is systemic. A full corporate investigation begins tomorrow. That seems excessive for 3 buried discrimination complaints, 5 terminated whistleblowers, security footage showing a pattern of behavior. Would you like me to continue? Silence on the line. Anthony creates a secure online portal, typing efficiently. The site offers anonymity and whistleblower protections for current and former employees across all restaurant locations in his group. Time to see how deep this goes, he murmurs, finalizing the site before distributing access through company channels. His phone rings again. Unknown number. Mr. Daniels? A female voice, hesitant yet determined. This is Tiana Williams. I was serving at Costello's tonight. She pauses, voice dropping. There's something you need to know about Manager Thomas and the regional director. This goes higher than you think. What Tiana reveals next confirms Anthony's suspicions. This isn't just about one restaurant. The next morning, Anthony meets Tiana at a quiet coffee shop downtown, away from Costello's. Her hands wrap nervously around her mug as she slides a USB drive across the table. I've been documenting everything for months, she explains. Thomas and Regional Director Cameron have a system. Complaints from minority customers get flagged and diverted directly to them instead of corporate HR. Anthony reviews the files on his laptop. Emails, texts, recorded conversations that Tiana had carefully saved. The evidence is unambiguous. They coached staff on how to handle certain customers, Tiana continues. Code words for giving worse service to people of color. If anyone complained, Thomas would personally resolve it, meaning bury it. And if staff objected? Anthony asks, though he already suspects the answer. Reduced hours, difficult shifts, eventual termination for performance issues, Tiana confirms. I've lasted because I pretended to go along with it, but it's been eating at me. Back at Pinnacle headquarters, Anthony convenes his executive team. The conference room screens display damning statistics from their HR review. 47% of discrimination complaints company-wide were improperly handled, the HR director reports. 23 employees across 12 locations were terminated after reporting racist treatment. 15 were pressured to sign NDAs. Several executives shift uncomfortably. Some appear genuinely shocked. Others seem more concerned about potential publicity damage. This extends beyond Costello's, Anthony states. We have a cultural problem that requires immediate, systemic action. Chief Marketing Officer Philip Bennett raises concerns about brand reputation. The incident is trending on social media. Our PR team suggests a quick, contained response focusing on the single employee. No, Anthony interrupts firmly. We're not burying this or deflecting. We address it comprehensively and transparently. Meanwhile, Blake attempts damage control through a local news outlet. The interview airs on morning television. I'm being canceled over a simple accident, he claims, expression wounded. In today's climate, service workers are afraid to do their jobs without being accused of racism. The reporter appears skeptical. Witnesses report you made several discriminatory comments before the water incident. Taken out of context, Blake insists. Mr. Daniels is using his power and privilege to destroy my career over nothing. The segment cuts to viral video clearly showing Blake's deliberate actions and comments. His narrative crumbles in real time as the reporter questions the obvious discrepancies. Anthony's phone buzzes with an alert from legal. Blake Henderson has filed a wrongful termination lawsuit, claiming discrimination against him as a white employee and demanding reinstatement plus damages. Blake's lawsuit might be the perfect opportunity to expose the entire system in public record. Blake and Thomas appear on American Values Today, a right-wing talk show with a history of inflammatory coverage. Blake sits with perfect posture, playing the persecuted victim. "What happened to due process in America?" the host demands indignantly. "Mr. Henderson made an honest mistake, and now the woke mob wants his head." "I've served thousands of customers with nothing but respect," Blake claims, eyes appropriately mournful for the camera. "One spilled water pitcher, and suddenly my 20 years in the industry means nothing." Thomas nods sympathetically beside him. "We're seeing cancel culture destroy good people's lives over simple misunderstandings." The segment conveniently omits the viral videos showing Blake's deliberate actions and comments. Meanwhile, Anthony's anonymous reporting system floods with testimonials. His team works overtime categorizing responses. Former servers describing racist seating policies, kitchen staff recounting slurs used by management, customers detailing discriminatory treatment. 63 submissions in the first 12 hours, Diana reports, displaying the analytics dashboard. 82% report similar experiences to what your family encountered. Anthony studies the patterns emerging across multiple locations. The problem isn't isolated to Blake, Thomas, or even Cameron. It's embedded in unofficial practices throughout the organization. He personally calls several former employees who had been silenced. Their shock at hearing directly from the CEO quickly gives way to catharsis. "I thought nobody would ever believe me," admits former chef Jerome Wilson, voice breaking. "They fired me after I reported kitchen managers using racial slurs. Made me sign an NDA to get my final paycheck." "I believe you," Anthony responds, "and I want your input on how we fix this." That evening, Michelle joins Anthony in his home office, bringing a cup of tea as he reviews documentation. She studies the concern etched in his features. "What if we host a forum?" she suggests. "Give affected employees a chance to speak directly with leadership. Real change can't just come from the top down." Anthony considers this. "You're right. We need their voices, their experiences to guide the reforms." As they begin outlining the forum structure, Anthony's phone rings. The display shows Restaurant Industry Quarterly. "Mr. Daniels? I'm Emma Chen from RIQ. We've been investigating racism in fine dining for months, and your situation has broken open something much bigger." She pauses. "Dozens of workers from across the industry want to talk. This goes beyond your restaurant group. It's an industry-wide reckoning that's long overdue." As Anthony prepares to respond, he realizes this moment could transform not just his company, but the entire restaurant industry. The Pinnacle Restaurant Group boardroom falls silent as Anthony concludes his presentation. Emergency board meetings are rare. This one has lasted 3 hours. Financial reports and marketing strategies have been replaced by discrimination statistics and testimonials. "Questions?" Anthony asks, standing confidently before the stunned executives. Board member Victoria Kingsley leans forward. "Anthony, while this is concerning, is such an extensive response necessary? The publicity alone could—" "Let me be clear about something," Anthony interrupts. He switches slides to a photograph of himself from 15 years earlier, younger but recognizable, standing outside a courthouse. "Before I entered the restaurant industry, I spent 12 years as a civil rights attorney specializing in workplace discrimination cases." Murmurs ripple through the boardroom. "I didn't randomly decide to invest in restaurants," Anthony continues. "I chose this industry specifically because of its notorious problems with racism and classism. My goal was always to transform it from the inside." The revelation lands heavily. Some board members exchange glances, connecting dots they'd never noticed before. "Protocol dignity isn't something I created overnight in response to what happened to my family," Anthony explains, revealing comprehensive documentation. "It's a program I've been developing for years, anti-discrimination infrastructure designed specifically for the restaurant industry." He displays a detailed implementation plan, revamped hiring practices, promotion criteria, complaint procedures, customer service protocols, and mandatory training programs. We've been quietly collecting data for years, Anthony continues, cycling through meticulously documented incidents across their restaurant portfolio. What happened to my family confirmed what our data already showed. This is systemic. The chief financial officer raises concerns about implementation costs. Consider the costs of not acting, Anthony counters. Legal liabilities, staff turnover, reputation damage, lost customers. Discrimination is expensive. Inclusion is profitable. The vote is unanimous. Protocol dignity will be implemented company-wide, effective immediately. That evening, Anthony finds Michelle in their bedroom, reading through employee testimonials he'd brought home. "These are heartbreaking," she says. "So many people experienced what we did, but without the power to do anything about it." Anthony sits beside her, shoulders heavy with responsibility. "I keep thinking, if this happens to us, with all our privilege and position, what happens to families without that protection?" Michelle takes his hand. "That's exactly why you're in this position. Your experiences as a black man and your skills as an attorney created this opportunity. Now you're using it." "I didn't want our family to become the example," Anthony admits, "especially not Jasmine. Her graduation celebration became a lesson in how the world still sees us." She asked to speak at the employee forum, Michelle reveals. She wants to share her perspective as both a black teenager and the daughter of the CEO. Anthony's surprise gives way to pride. "She's braver than I was at her age." "She has you as an example," Michelle responds. "She watched you respond with dignity and strategic action rather than just anger." Their conversation is interrupted by Jasmine knocking on the doorframe. "Dad, can I show you what I'm thinking of saying at the forum?" Anthony feels a complex mix of emotions, pride in his daughter's courage, regret that she needs such courage in the first place, determination to create meaningful change. "Of course," he says, making room for her to join them. The next morning, as final preparations for the employee forum are underway, Anthony receives word that several major restaurant groups are anxiously monitoring his next moves. Some have already begun quietly reviewing their own practices, concerned about becoming the next exposed case. In his office, Anthony reviews Jasmine's speaking notes. Her perspective is powerful, describing how it felt to have a celebration of her academic achievement transformed into a lesson in racial discrimination. Her words capture something statistics cannot: the human cost of allowing such behavior to continue. "This is excellent," he tells her. "Your voice will make a difference." "Do you think anything will really change?" Jasmine asks, the weight of the question revealing her awareness beyond her years. Anthony considers his answer carefully. "Systems don't change overnight, and some people never change their hearts. But we can change structures, policies, expectations, and consequences. We can make discrimination expensive and difficult while making inclusion valuable and rewarding." "That's not very inspirational, Dad," Jasmine observes with a hint of a smile. "The truth rarely fits on an inspirational poster," Anthony replies. "But here's another truth. Change happens when those with power use it to amplify the voices of those without it. Your voice matters, Jasmine. People will listen because of who I am, but they'll remember because of what you say." As father and daughter prepare to change their industry together, the ripple effects of one waiter's actions are about to become a tidal wave. The lawsuit lands with a thud on Anthony's desk. Blake Henderson vs. Pinnacle Restaurant Group claims wrongful termination, defamation, and reverse discrimination. Blake demands reinstatement, back pay, and punitive damages. "He's serious about this?" Anthony asks Sarah Chen, Pinnacle's chief legal officer. "He found an attorney willing to take it on contingency," Sarah explains. "They're playing to media narratives about cancel culture, but legally?" She shakes her head. "It's meritless." 3 days later, Blake's attorney withdraws from the case after Sarah presents their evidence. Security footage from multiple angles, documented pattern of complaints, testimony from other staff members, and Blake's own incriminating statements to coworkers. "Your client lied to you," Sarah informs the attorney during their conference call. "We have him on record telling kitchen staff he deliberately targeted the Daniels family." The employee forum transforms Pinnacle's headquarters. The main conference center, typically reserved for shareholder meetings, now hosts current and former employees from across the restaurant group. The space buzzes with nervous energy as Anthony takes the stage. "Thank you for your courage in being here today," he begins. "Some of you risked jobs, references, even violated NDAs to speak truth. That stops now. Pinnacle is voiding all non-disclosure agreements related to discrimination or harassment claims, effective immediately." A ripple of surprise moves through the audience. "We're here to listen," Anthony continues, "because meaningful change requires understanding the full extent of the problem. Your experiences aren't isolated incidents. They're evidence of systemic failures that we're committed to addressing." Over the next 3 hours, employees share experiences that confirm the problem extends far beyond one restaurant or manager. A former host describes being instructed to seat white customers in preferred sections. A bartender recounts managers discussing which servers were appropriate for serving VIPs. A line cook describes racial slurs used casually in kitchens. When Jasmine Daniels steps to the microphone, the room grows exceptionally quiet. "I'm here because what happened to my family isn't unique," she begins, voice steady despite her youth. "The only difference is that my dad was in a position to do something about it." She describes watching her graduation celebration transform into a public humiliation. "I was proud of my accomplishments that day. I'd worked hard, but in that restaurant, none of that mattered. What mattered was how we looked." Her perspective lands with particular impact. The innocent celebration tainted by discrimination, viewed through a teenager's eyes. "What happened to us made the news because of who my dad is. But it happens to families every day. The difference is, most people don't own the restaurant." After the forum, Anthony announces comprehensive reforms. An independent review board will oversee discrimination complaints. Anti-bias training becomes mandatory for all employees. Hiring and promotion policies are overhauled to address systemic inequities. Anonymous customer feedback systems are implemented with specific metrics tracking equal treatment. Several executives who had been complicit in covering up previous complaints quietly submit their resignations rather than adapt to the new standards. Cameron Walsh, the regional director who buried complaints at Costello's, attempts to negotiate a generous severance package. "I've been with Pinnacle for 15 years, he argues in Anthony's office. "My record speaks for itself." "Indeed it does," Anthony responds, sliding a folder across the desk. 327 complaints processed under your supervision. 84% from minority customers or staff were dismissed without investigation. Only 12% of complaints from white customers received the same treatment. He closes the folder. "Your severance is 2 weeks' pay. Standard for termination with cause." New leadership emerges. Anthony promotes Tiana Williams from server to a newly created corporate role focused on restaurant culture and inclusion. Her first task, developing metrics to track progress on equity goals across all locations. Media coverage intensifies as Restaurant Industry Quarterly publishes its major investigation. The article features Anthony's case prominently, but reveals discrimination as endemic throughout fine dining. Former employees from other restaurant groups come forward with similar stories, inspired by Pinnacle's transparency. The Daniels incident was a tipping point, the article concludes. What began as one waiter's racist actions has exposed an industry-wide problem that can no longer be ignored. Anthony leverages his influence with suppliers and industry associations, making it clear that Pinnacle will prioritize partnerships with companies that share their commitment to equity. "Our purchasing power exceeds $300 million annually," he reminds reluctant industry leaders during a conference call. "We'll direct that toward partners who demonstrate concrete commitments to inclusion." Other restaurant groups begin reaching out. Some approach defensively, concerned they might be the next target of public scrutiny. Others appear genuinely committed to change, seeking guidance on implementing similar reforms. Anthony engages selectively, prioritizing those who demonstrate sincerity. "We're not interested in performative changes," he explains to his team. "We're looking for partners committed to structural reform." 6 weeks after the incident at Costello's, the Daniels family shares a quiet dinner at home. The formal dining room, with its elegant table setting, offers a stark contrast to their experience at the restaurant. Michelle places a cake in the center, a belated celebration of Jasmine's graduation. "This is nice," Jasmine says, looking around at her family. "Better than that restaurant anyway." Tyler, ever direct at 10 years old, asks the question that's been on his mind. "Dad, did the bad waiter learn his lesson?" Anthony considers how to answer, aware that his children are learning how justice functions in an imperfect world. "Some people change when confronted with their behavior," he explains carefully. "Others don't. But either way, we've helped make dining safer for other families. Sometimes that's the best we can do. Make things better for those who come after us, even when the person who did wrong doesn't learn." "Is that enough?" Jasmine asks, the question weighted with emerging adult understanding of systemic inequity. "It has to be," Michelle answers softly. "We can't control how others respond. We can only control our own actions and use whatever influence we have to create better systems." Anthony receives a text from Diana. Blake Henderson has requested a private meeting, claiming he wants to apologize. His team has discovered that Blake and Thomas plan to wear recording devices, arranged by a conservative media outlet hoping to catch Anthony making damaging statements. "Do you have to work tonight?" Tyler asks, noting his father's attention to the phone. Anthony puts the device away. "No, tonight is for us. Everything else can wait." He looks around the table at his family. Michelle's quiet strength, Jasmine's emerging conviction, Tyler's innocent perception, and recognizes what truly matters. The systems may change slowly, but this moment, this celebration of his daughter's achievement, finally happens without discrimination or humiliation intruding. To Jasmine, he raises his glass, "Your future is bright, and you'll help make the world brighter for others." As the family celebrates, Anthony doesn't yet know that Blake's planned ambush will backfire in ways that will expose far more than one waiter's bigotry. Despite knowing about the wires, Anthony agrees to meet Blake and Thomas. He chooses the conference room at Pinnacle headquarters, neutral territory with his legal team present. "Record everything," he instructs security, "openly and transparently." Blake and Thomas arrive with poorly concealed confidence. Their expressions falter when they see the recording equipment prominently displayed on the conference table. "Welcome," Anthony greets them. "As you can see, we'll be documenting this conversation from our end as well." Blake shifts uncomfortably, exchanging glances with Thomas. The hidden recording devices in their breast pockets suddenly feel obvious, their plan to capture out-of-context statements already compromised. "Mr. Daniels," Blake begins, tone carefully contrite. "I wanted to personally apologize for the unfortunate incident at Costello's. My actions were inappropriate, and I deeply regret how I treated your family." Thomas nods earnestly. "We both recognize that mistakes were made, and we're committed to learning and growing from this experience." Anthony listens silently, allowing them to continue their performance. When they finish, he opens a folder containing printed documents, photographs, and transcripts. "I appreciate you coming today," he responds evenly. "Before we continue, I'd like to share some information." He lays out evidence methodically. Security footage showing Blake's deliberate water spill, transcripts of Blake's discriminatory comments to other staff, documentation of Thomas enabling similar behavior with other customers, testimony from former employees who experienced harassment. "This isn't about one incident with my family," Anthony explains calmly. "This is about a pattern affecting dozens of people over years." Blake's rehearsed contrition begins to crack. Thomas stares at the evidence, particularly the documentation tying him to Cameron Walsh's systematic burial of complaints. "You have two options," Anthony continues. Participate honestly in a restorative justice process with those you've harmed, or face a public legal battle you cannot win. I'm not interested in punishment for its own sake. I want accountability and change. Thomas glances at the door, visibly calculating his options. Blake's face flushes red. Restorative justice? Blake scoffs, mask of remorse evaporating. You mean public humiliation? Self-flagellation for the crime of spilled water? For the crime of deliberate discrimination, Anthony corrects. Against my family and many others. This is ridiculous, Blake snaps, rising from his chair. You people always make everything about race. I've served all kinds of customers for 20 years. You people? Anthony repeats quietly. Blake's composure disintegrates completely. Yes! You people playing the race card whenever something doesn't go your way. I didn't do anything wrong. You're just another entitled The slur hangs in the air. Thomas physically recoils from Blake, suddenly desperate to create distance. I think we have what we need, Anthony says to his legal team. He turns back to Blake. That performance might have worked for your media friends, but you just revealed your true character on multiple recordings. The planned ambush piece by the conservative outlet never airs. Instead, they quietly distance themselves from Blake, whose unedited outburst proves too toxic even for their audience. Thomas, seeing the inevitable outcome, distances himself from Blake as well. I want to take the restorative justice option, he tells Anthony as they leave. I was wrong. I enabled this culture, and I need to make amends. Over the following weeks, Thomas participates in anti-bias education and begins the difficult work of making amends. He meets with former employees who experienced discrimination under his management, listening to their experiences without defensiveness. Blake refuses the restorative justice path, instead doubling down on claims of victimhood. His media appearances grow increasingly fringe as mainstream outlets avoid him. Former colleagues and customers come forward with additional accounts of his behavior from previous workplaces. When Blake applies for positions at other restaurants, his reputation follows him. Managers Google his name and find the viral videos, his discriminatory outburst in Anthony's office, and testimonials from former coworkers. Doors close before he can even interview. 6 months later, Thomas speaks at an industry conference on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in restaurant management. He doesn't portray himself as a hero or seek redemption narratives. He simply shares what he learned through his mistakes and the harm they caused. I was part of the problem, he admits to the audience. Now I'm trying to be part of the solution. As Thomas concludes his presentation, a legislative aide in the audience makes notes for an upcoming committee hearing on discrimination in public accommodations. The Illinois State Capitol hearing room buzzes with anticipation. Legislative Committee on Public Accommodations Chairman Senator Robert Garcia gavels the session to order. Today we examine discrimination in restaurant service, he announces. Our first witness is Anthony Daniels, CEO of Pinnacle Restaurant Group. Anthony approaches the witness table, placing a thick binder of documentation before him. The committee members lean forward, attentive to the man whose family's experience catalyzed a movement. Discrimination in restaurants isn't about isolated incidents, Anthony begins. It's about systemic patterns. He presents data collected across Pinnacle's 43 restaurants before implementing Protocol Dignity. The statistics reveal consistent disparities in service quality, wait times, table assignments, and complaint resolution based on customers' perceived race. Individual bad actors exist within systems that enable them, Anthony explains. Both must be addressed simultaneously. His testimony avoids sensationalism, instead offering concrete policy recommendations, stronger enforcement of existing public accommodation laws, clearer reporting mechanisms for customers experiencing discrimination, incentive programs for businesses implementing comprehensive anti-bias measures. The hearing stretches into afternoon, with testimony from industry representatives, civil rights advocates, and affected customers. Anthony's evidence-based approach provides a framework that transcends political divisions. Discrimination is bad for business, harmful to employees, and violates core principles of equal treatment. 2 weeks later, the Chicago Restaurant Alliance, representing over 200 establishments, announces industry-wide standards for anti-discrimination policies and reporting mechanisms. Some join reluctantly, fearing negative publicity. Others embrace the opportunity for meaningful change. "We are committed to ensuring every guest receives equal, excellent service," their statement reads. "Our industry can and must do better." Restaurant Industry Quarterly receives the James Beard Foundation Journalism Award for their investigation into racism in fine dining. Their reporting expands to cover other forms of discrimination, including against disabled patrons and LGBTQ+ employees. What began with the Daniels family has sparked broader examination of hospitality practices. Tiana Williams, now Pinnacle's Director of Inclusive Excellence, implements a certification program for restaurants meeting rigorous anti-discrimination standards. The Dignity Certified designation quickly becomes a mark of quality that conscious consumers seek when choosing dining destinations. "It's not just about avoiding negative incidents," Tiana explains in a business magazine profile. "It's about creating consistently excellent experiences for all guests, regardless of background." Pinnacle's restaurants see increased business and improved employee retention as their commitment to equity becomes known. Exit interviews reveal staff feel pride working for an organization with clear values and accountability. Anthony establishes a scholarship and training program specifically designed to create pathways to restaurant ownership for underrepresented groups. The initiative addresses the industry's persistent ownership disparities by providing capital, mentorship, and business development resources. "Changing who serves is important," Anthony explains at the program launch. "Changing who owns and leads is essential." Industry publications track the Daniels effect as it ripples through restaurant culture. Surveys show increased awareness of discrimination among both customers and management. Reporting mechanisms become standard practice. Training programs evolve beyond superficial diversity exercises to address structural barriers and unconscious bias. The changes aren't universal or perfect. Some establishments resist, claiming traditional service practices. Others implement performative changes without addressing underlying culture. But the direction of progress becomes clear and increasingly difficult to ignore. 6 months after his legislative testimony, Anthony receives an unexpected letter with a postmark from a small town 3 states away. The careful handwriting belongs to Thomas Fleming, whose journey from enabler to advocate has taken an unexpected turn. Anthony studies the letter, recognizing Thomas Fleming's name on the return address. He opens it carefully, uncertain what to expect. "Dear Mr. Daniels," it begins, "I've completed the restorative justice program and anti-bias education we discussed. These past months have transformed my understanding of discrimination and my role in perpetuating it." Thomas explains his journey, the difficult conversations with former employees he'd failed, the painful recognition of patterns he'd ignored, the gradual dismantling of justifications he'd built to protect himself from accountability. "I'll never fully comprehend the harm I caused," Thomas writes, "but I'm committed to preventing others from experiencing it. I've begun working with Restaurant Equity Alliance, training management staff on recognizing and addressing discriminatory practices." Anthony shares the letter with his family that evening. They gather in the living room, the space warm with familial comfort that contrasts sharply with their experience at Costello's. "Do you believe him?" Jasmine asks, skepticism evident in her voice. "I believe people can change," Anthony answers carefully. "But that change is demonstrated through consistent actions, not just words." Tyler, now 11, considers this. "I hope he's really a good person now." Michelle watches her son's earnest expression. "People are complicated, Tyler. They can learn and grow, but trust has to be earned, especially after it's been broken. How we respond is another opportunity to model our values," Anthony reflects. "We can acknowledge growth without forgetting harm." After family discussion, they make a decision that surprises even Anthony. They will return to Costello's, not to test Thomas's sincerity, but to see for themselves how the restaurant has transformed. The following weekend, they approach the familiar facade of Costello's. The restaurant has been completely renovated, not just physically, but operationally. Under new management, the staff reflects Chicago's diversity. The atmosphere feels genuinely welcoming. A host greets them warmly, with no recognition of who they are, exactly what Anthony hoped to experience. They're seated promptly at a comfortable table, treated with the same professional courtesy extended to all guests. Their server, a young woman named Ava, presents menus with knowledgeable descriptions of specials. Her manner is attentive without hovering, respectful without condescension. Anthony observes similar treatment at surrounding tables, consistency that indicates cultural change, not performance. Midway through their meal, Ava returns with a look of realization. "You're Anthony Daniels, aren't you?" she asks quietly. "The CEO?" Anthony acknowledges his identity, prepared for the interaction to change. Instead, Ava simply says, "Thank you. The changes your company made have transformed this workplace. It's the best restaurant I've ever worked in." As they enjoy dessert, the celebration they originally intended finally happening in a space where they're treated with dignity, Jasmine makes an observation that strikes Anthony deeply. "What happened to us was just one visible instance of what many people experience without the power to drive change," she says. "We had a platform most don't have." Anthony nods, acknowledging this privilege and responsibility. "Which is why we must use whatever influence we have to create more equitable spaces. Not everyone can own the restaurant, but everyone deserves to be treated with dignity inside it." They toast to Jasmine's graduation again, the celebration reclaimed and transformed. The water stays firmly in glasses, served with respect by staff who see them as valued guests rather than unwelcome intruders. True power isn't in a title or wealth, Anthony reflects, watching his family enjoy a moment that should have been theirs all along. It's in using whatever influence you have to ensure dignity for everyone. Michelle squeezes his hand under the table, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they've traveled together, from humiliation to transformation, from individual incident to systemic change. The check arrives with a simple note. "Congratulations on your graduation, Jasmine. Your family's courage changed everything." 1 year later, Anthony stands at the podium of the National Restaurant Association's annual conference. The audience, owners, managers, and industry leaders from across the country, listens attentively as he presents data from Pinnacle's first full year implementing Protocol Dignity. "The numbers tell a clear story," Anthony explains, gesturing toward the projected graphs. Customer satisfaction up 37%. Employee retention improved by 41%. Discrimination complaints down 96%. He pauses, allowing the statistics to register. But most importantly, these aren't just metrics. They represent real human experiences, people being treated with the dignity they deserve. Across town, Blake Henderson stocks shelves at a convenience store, his restaurant career effectively over. A television mounted near the ceiling plays footage of Anthony's keynote speech. Blake watches briefly, expression hardening, before turning away. His bitterness remains, but his ability to inflict harm on customers has been neutralized. The industry has moved forward without him. At Northwestern University, Jasmine Daniels leads a meeting of Equal Table, the student organization she founded focusing on addressing discrimination in campus dining services. The group has already successfully advocated for anonymous reporting systems and inclusive hiring practices. "It's not enough to react after incidents occur," she tells the gathered students, echoing her father's methodical approach. "We need proactive systems that prevent discrimination from happening in the first place." Anthony joins a private dinner with restaurant owners who have adopted versions of Protocol Dignity. The atmosphere is collaborative rather than competitive, a shared commitment to transforming industry culture. "We've made progress," says Gabriela Morales, owner of an upscale Mexican restaurant group. But we're still facing resistance from old guard establishments claiming customers prefer traditional service. Traditional for whom? Responds James Liu, whose family owns a successful chain of fusion restaurants. Our customers appreciate knowing everyone receives equal treatment. It's become a selling point. The conversation turns to next steps, expanding their focus to address wage disparities, advancement barriers, and supplier diversity. What began with one incident has evolved into a comprehensive movement for equity throughout the food service ecosystem. Back home, the Daniels family hosts dinner for an expanded circle that includes Tiana, now a rising executive, and several key figures in their journey. The dining table that once served as a space to process humiliation now hosts celebration of collective achievement. Tyler, growing increasingly perceptive at 11, asks the question that brings the room to thoughtful silence. Would all this have happened if that waiter hadn't been mean to us? Anthony considers his son's question. Sometimes meaningful change begins with painful moments, he responds. But what matters isn't how it starts. It's who chooses to stand up, speak out, and do the difficult work of creating better systems. He looks around at the gathered faces, family, colleagues, allies who became friends through shared purpose. Dignity isn't a privilege, Anthony concludes. It's a right that must be defended for all. How would you have handled this situation differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Beat Stories for more powerful real-life dramas that will leave you inspired. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our newest uploads. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories of courage and dignity.